An Inuit hunter asked a local missionary priest, "If I did not know about God and sin, would I go to hell?" "No," answered the priest, "not if you did not know about God." "Then why," asked the Inuit hunter earnestly, "did you tell me?" If you grew up like I did in a small church that we had one pastor. I didn't grow up in a mega church with all kinds of exciting stuff happening. We had to make our own excitement. And so for us, when we had a missionary visit our church, they would often give a very special talk to the congregation. We had a very small congregation, but we would often have them come from exotic locales. At least we thought it was exotic. And they would give us a talk and tell us all, and sometimes a slideshow, and give us a talk about what they were doing with the local savages that they were trying to save. And that's how we looked at it. We didn't call them that, but of course, in your mind, that's what you're imagining. You're imagining cannibals and people with spears, and that they were in danger of every moment of their life. Of course, most of the time that wasn't true, but that's how it was presented. So it was, very stirring. It was very exciting. And of course, at the end, they would always take up a love offering, and you would open up your wallet and throw your cash in, and off the missionary would go. And you would feel so good about yourself. You were helping these savages get saved, and for Jesus. You were helping Jesus out. And that felt so good. Now, when I became a United Methodist after my first 30 years, I went to a much larger church. I became a part of, for a United Methodist church, it had a couple thousand members, which is basically a mega church for them, because they don't tend to have a lot of members. And now that church is broken up and really doesn't exist anymore. I digress. They had a large missionary presence. At the time that I was attending the United Methodist Church, they had over 400,000 missionaries all over the world. And I remember I went long before Honduras was a place that Americans went to, the island of Roatan. I went many years ago before it even had a port. I went on a very small ship, and we were some of the first Americans, tourist Americans that went there. They didn't even have paved roads. It was dirt roads. And I remember being so proud of the fact that I stepped off the ship, and there was a United Methodist missionary compound. And I thought, how exciting, how wonderful. Let me go in and give them some money so I can support them. And later on, many years later, I went back to Roatan, and I spent about a half a day doing some mission work there. I went to an orphanage and brought supplies, and I thought I felt so good about myself, and I thought I was doing such a good thing by supporting this. But it wasn't good. It wasn't good at all. I was wrong. What was my first hint that missionary work wasn't all it was cracked up to be? And you're going to be surprised, because it was a lot earlier than you would imagine it would be. I'm a big reader. I read a lot. And when I was 16, I picked up the book by James Michner, Hawaii. And I loved this book. I loved it so much. I love all of James Michner's work. But essentially what he does is he'll take a geographical area. He's done Colorado, and he's done the Chesapeake Bay, and all different kinds. But this one was about Hawaii, and he takes it from literally the geology of Hawaii all the way to where it became an American state. So these are huge books. These are giant books. And so he does it through, usually when he writes, he'll do it through the lens of different characters. That's how he does it. And one of the characters in the book is a Reverend Abner Hale. And he's an uptight guy, and he goes to the Hawaiian Islands. This was in the 1800s. This was set in the 1800s. This particular part of the book that I got to. He and his wife come from New England, and they go to Hawaii. And up until that time, you're reading all about how the Hawaiians got there, the native Hawaiians got there, and their culture. And it seems so beautiful, and it seems so idyllic and wonderful. And then the missionaries start coming in. And it's told mostly, the missionary part of it's told mostly through Abner Hale. What I didn't know at the time was that it was based on a real life missionary. But at the time, I was just appalled at Abner Hale, what a horrible person he was, how he wanted to destroy the Hawaiian culture that he saw as heathenistic, paganistic, and wrong. He didn't only want to save their souls, he came to destroy their culture. So I thought, well, James Michner's a secular guy. He probably has a grudge against Christians, and I thought most people did. At the time when I was a Christian, I thought most people had a grudge against Christians. And so I wrote this off as, well, James Michner hates Christians, and he's just writing this in a way that makes a fictional character that's a Christian look bad. Because I was told that the secular world, movies, books, they're always trying to make Christians look bad. That's what they do. Come to find out, about a year later, I found out that no, Abner Hale was actually based upon a real missionary by the name of Hiram Bingham, who came from New England with his wife and set about trying to destroy Hawaiian culture, that's based in reality. Because James Michner, if you don't like him, then you don't like him. But no one can dispute the fact that he really does a lot of research on his books and bases them in as close to reality as you can get. Side note, if you haven't read this book, whether you are an atheist or a Christian, you really, really should. It's an amazing work. They do have a couple of movies based on the book, but they're not very good. The book is amazing. You should read it and get an understanding of what missionary work in its worst form can do. I will link the book in the description. If you buy it from my link, I make a few pennies, just so you know. But you don't have to. You can buy it anywhere. But if you buy it from my link, I'll make a little money to support the channel. But in any event, that's what I thought. And then when I found out it was based on a real guy, of course I was horrified. And I thought, oh my. But of course, like all Christians do, when you hear some of this stuff, I soothed myself over by saying, well, missionaries do better, they do more good work than bad. And I can accept that sometimes you'll get a rogue person who will do what he's doing. And in real life, and in the book, that missionary, Hiram Bingham, he gets called back. He's so bad that even the church realizes that he's interfering too much in their politics, and they call him back to New England, and he is never able to go back to Hawaii. Of course, I was ignoring the treatment of Native Americans, Inuits, which I love that quote in the beginning of this video. I love that, and of African slaves. We're ignoring it, and African peoples. African peoples were missionaries, after the end of the slavery period. Now white missionaries go over there and they become white imperialist colonizers, taking the land, using missionary work to go about the world, seizing land, seizing power, destroying cultures. Of course, all of that over my head, because this is not what we talked about in church. We clap, we give the love offering. And even if even Christians that will acknowledge that this sometimes happens, they soothe themselves over by saying, well, we're doing more good than harm by going there. But do they? Are they? So no one can argue that missionaries and mission work hasn't done good things. Let's talk about the pros. And I'm sure in the comments you can tell me more pros and more cons. I'm just going to go over the obvious ones. The obvious ones is, yes, missionaries have built hospitals. They have brought doctors over. They have helped cure diseases that were frankly unaliving people, by the thousands. Of course, sometimes they brought the diseases over, but I digress. They have helped that way. Have they done things, very, very practical things like dug wells? This kind of thing, help the locals dig wells. Yes, my children used to support a mission where they would once a year do a 24-hour fast and spend the night in the church being very hungry together. And they would get pledges from, the neighboring, our neighbors and our friends and us get pledges that how many hours can they go being without eating. And you might pledge $1 an hour or something. And at the end, we would break bread with it. We would go to the church and we would bring our children a big spaghetti dinner and we would eat together and just praise God and be so happy that we bought these people some farm animals. That's what would happen with the money. The money would be sent to buy people in Africa or wherever farm animals so they could have them a goat or a cow or however much money they raised. And yeah, you feel good about that. And yes, they did that. That's what would happen. So yes, that happened. Do they teach life skills, modern life skills, to people that already wouldn't have it? So do they teach modern farming methods that will help them, get bigger and better plants and animals? Yeah, yes, we do. Yes, those kind of things do happen. But unfortunately, there's a lot of cons that go with that. What are the cons? I briefly mentioned this in the pros. Especially 100 or 200 years ago. Probably not so much now. Obviously not as much now. But 100, 200 years ago, before vaccinations were a big thing or before we understood about spreading germs, they would bring European diseases to people that had no immunity against them. Which isn't that kind of a check the box for evolution? They had not evolved or gotten immunity for these diseases. So while they're curing diseases, they're also wiping out sometimes entire native populations. This is not something that's disputed. We know that. It's taught in every textbook. So, but in their defense, in the missionaries' defense, they think they're bringing Jesus to these savages so that they can go to heaven. So in their mind, they're saying, well, at least they're going to heaven. One thing that isn't talked about enough, the next thing, is that they destroy local customs, local traditions, local culture. And that makes the world a much poorer place. That makes the world such a poor place. When you are not just bringing your religion, you're trying to bring your culture with it. That's what they try and do. Just like in the book Hawaii, Abner Hale did not like it that the Hawaiians roamed around mostly naked, and he would try and clothe them. He didn't like it that they were surfing. He didn't like any of their local traditions. He thought they were sinful. They went against the Bible, especially the puritanical version of the Bible. So that is a loss to the world, the loss over the last, say, 500 years of so much tradition and culture is gone. And with getting rid of the local traditions and culture, there's too much political interference. Missionaries since the beginning have brought too much political interference, really in an attempt for a land grab by wherever they came from. This is a huge problem. There's even doctrines that the church has had about it, and it's bled into politics where they're saying if it's not a Christian nation, it's up for grabs. And that's a real thing. It's the discovery. That's what it's called. It's the discovery doctrine. You discover it, it's not Christian. You try and save the population and in turn grab the local resources away from them. That has been a problem. It's still a problem, but especially, 200 years ago. And here's a problem that is especially bad with modern missionary work, and that's breaking local laws. There are laws on the books in other countries that Christian missionaries especially are not allowed to come in and disturb the local populations. And so many Christians do it anyway. And it has gotten them unalived. I don't know what to say. I feel bad that they were unalived, I guess. But they went against the law and they did it for their own detriment, and it would have been a detriment to the tribe had they succeeded. But you see this all the time. They're trying to sneak Bibles into places. They're trying to contact tribes that shouldn't be contacted for their own safety and for the safety of the missionary, and they try to do it anyway. This is not the video for this, but I could go from story after story after story about missionaries that have been unalived. And of course, as someone who's on this side of it, when I was a Christian, oh, how terrible. Oh, what kind of horrible savages are these people to kill these poor missionaries who were just bringing food and hospitals and telling them about Jesus. What kind of horrible people are these? Obviously, they're satanic. So we have to ask the question, when you look at the pros and you look at the cons, are the local populations that are being missionaried to, are they better off or are they worse? Are they better off getting the hospitals, the wells, the modern farming methods, being exposed to modern technologies, or are they worse off? Which is it? I don't think there's a cut and dried answer, but I would say, looking at it, I regret ever supporting missions. I regret it with every being of my heart, of my body. And I think the answer is no. I don't think they're better off. But it's not a clear-cut answer, and here's why. Because humans evolved at a much quicker pace when we were able to share cultures. You see that in ancient texts. We know about trading routes, how things just sped up once cultures were able to travel and share with each other. There's nothing wrong with that, and we need that. There's nothing wrong with going to a culture, even if you think they're below you in technology, sharing what you know, and also taking in their local customs and traditions. And I think you can learn from that. That's something that we need. It's something that is not wrong. And I think it would be wrong for us to have what would be called the noble savage myth. There are some people that go to the other side who think that because somebody is still in a hunter and gathering culture, or they're still living in a more primitive way, that they're the noble savages and they don't need to learn from us and we don't need to learn from them, and that they're just better off alone. I don't, you'll have to tell me what you think about that in the comments, but I don't think that's true. These are human beings just like we are. And I don't agree with that. I think it's fine to share cultures. But here's what I don't think is fine. I don't think it's fine to invade a culture, destroy that culture because you don't think it aligns with your biblical worldview or your Western worldview or your white worldview. I don't think that's okay, because then you're not sharing, you're destroying. There's things that they can teach us, and there's things we can teach them. And that's how you have to go in looking at it. Unfortunately, because of the way that they're taught, most, I'm not saying all, but most Christian missionaries are hell-bent on it's their way or the highway. They have the answers. They have the one true God, and there's nothing that they can learn from these people who are so far below them. When we know that isn't true, we know that on the whole, people that live closer to nature, they live closer to how we're supposed to be, are often happier. They're often happier than when they're forced into this little peg that we've set for them. This is where we're going to force them into. So we can learn happiness. We can learn their methods. We can learn their hunting methods. Some of their farming methods are genius. We won't accept that, though, because we think we know better. You guys will have to tell me in the comments, how can we share cultures? How can we learn from each other? This is the question for people that are humanists and secularists. How can we do this in a way that doesn't destroy their culture? This is something that for us that aren't Christians, something that we need to grapple with and find out how we can do this better. Because the Christians will keep at it until we figure out a way to do it as well as they do without bringing all that baggage and learning from other cultures. So that's all I have for today. I can't wait to see you next time, and let me know what you think in the comments. I love hearing I love reading all of them. I do. I read almost every comment, and I try and respond to as many as I can. So let me know, give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. If you're interested in joining the channel to help me defray my costs or buying from any affiliate links I have, I appreciate it. All right, I'll see you next time.